This is lecture 48C, Deng Xiaoping, part 3. Deng's new political career begins as mayor of Chongqing. On October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong announced the People's Republic of China in Beijing, and that Deng and the other party leaders were there. Mao sent Deng to the southwest to take charge of that area. There were still fascist forces of Chiang Kai-shek to mop up. He took care of that, based out of Chongqing, and of course Tibet was going to be next, but it would have to wait for another year. Deng closed all of those fascist headquarters in the southern part of China. Chiang had been hanging around longer than he should have because he was trying to steal more money from the Deng Americans who were shipping plane loads of money to him, and he and his son were waiting on the tarmac, just like they do in Kiev, Baghdad, and Kabul today, to grab that cash off the plane and take it quickly to wherever they were going to take it. Well, at any rate, by late November 49, Deng's army had occupied Chongqing, and then they took Chengdu, which had been the last power of Chiang Kai-shek. And it's interesting because Deng had gone full circle, for he had started out as a student in Chongqing many years earlier, and we talked about that in lecture number 1 of this Deng Xiaoping series. So now he's going to be the boss of Chongqing for the next 3 years. At any rate, in July of 52, Mao calls him to Beijing. He takes over the finance commissariat. In 54, he gets a new job as deputy premier. In 56, he's made head of the Communist Party's organization department and a member of the Central Military Commission. And in 1958, we had the beginning of Mao's Great Leap Forward. Now, after the first 5-year plan was completed, in 1958, Mao called for grassroots socialism in order to accelerate his plans for turning China into a modern industrialized state. And in this spirit, Mao launched the Great Leap Forward, establishing the People's Communes in the countryside, and began the mass mobilization of the people into collectives. Now, many communities were assigned production of a single commodity, for example, steel, and Mao vowed to increase agricultural production to twice 1957 levels. Now, the Great Leap Forward turned out to be an economic failure. Unprepared farmers attempted to produce steel on a massive scale, partially relying on backyard furnaces to achieve the production target set by local cadres. The steel produced was of low quality and useless for modern machine tool purposes, and the Great Leap reduced harvest sizes in agriculture and led to a decline in the production of most goods, except for this substandard pig iron and steel, which was essentially useless. So, furthermore, the local authorities frequently exaggerated production numbers, hiding and intensifying the problem for several years. And in the meantime, chaos in the collectives, bad weather, and Stalin-esque exports of food necessary to secure hard currency resulted in food shortages, and production fell dramatically. Now, trying to get production moving again, Deng supported Mao Zedong in his 1957 anti-rightist movement. He also became party secretary general, and as such he was head of the secretariat. Now, this Chinese party government cabinet ran the country's daily affairs, along with the Prime Minister, Zhou Enlai, and the President, Liu Shaoqi. Now, Deng's orientation was to emphasize economic efficiency, or the disorganization that had come with the Great Leap Forward, and that attempt to get production moving had failed, as we've seen. So both Liu and Deng supported Mao in his ideological campaigns in the 1950s, in which they attacked the bourgeoisie and the capitalists and promoted Mao's ideology. However, with the failure of the Great Leap Forward and its inability to get the economy moving, Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping tried to take charge of economic policy and tried to get production moving again. Peng Dehuai, however, the hero of the 100 Regiments offensive we talked about in the last lecture, openly criticized Mao over the failure of the Great Leap. In an attempt to maintain political unity, Mao agreed to cede the presidency of the People's Republic of China to Liu Shaoqi, while retaining his positions as leader of the party and the army. Now, in 1963, Deng traveled to Moscow for the 20th Congress of the CPSU. This was the biggest international meeting since Khrushchev's attack on Stalin in 1956. Deng was leading the Chinese party delegation. The first such meeting since the Sino-Soviet split had split the international communist movement, and that had begun in the press in 1959. So Deng was to meet with Stalin's successor, Nikita Khrushchev. Relations between the People's Republic of China and the Soviet Union had steadily plummeted since the death of Stalin in 1953. Now, after this meeting, the Sino-Soviet split was out in the open officially, and the international movement divided. There was an almost total suspension of relations between the two major communist powers. China made the split clear in Long Live Leninism and the differences between Comrade Togliatti and us, and its sequel, more on the differences between Comrade Togliatti and us. Now, in China, Liu and Dong's economic reforms of the early 1960s were popular, restoring many economic institutions dismantled during the Great Leap Forward. However, Mao was unhappy. He could see that China was heading down the same modern revisionist course as the USSR after Stalin, and he was determined to prevent that no matter what the cost. The Cultural Revolution then appealed to the masses' revolutionary spirit, and Mao, with his tremendous personal prestige, launched it. He encouraged the masses to root out the right-wing capitalists who had infiltrated the party. Along the way, Dong was sometimes mistaken as the second in command of the capitalist Roaders faction. Dong was far from that, but the entire Cultural Revolution was theoretically poorly comprehended, and it was natural for honest people to disagree. Why so? Well, this goes to the theoretical quandary which we have discussed before several times. This Cultural Revolution course reflected an old, deeper problem for Marxist-Leninists. On the one hand, Marx and Engels' dialectical historical materialist theory of the science of history draws on the tripartite model of technology, that is, forces of production, and social organization, that is, relations of production, as the base of society. And upon this social base, called the mode of production, arises the third component, that is, ideology, as a social superstructure. Now, the theory holds that technology is the generator and negative feedback governor on social organization. On the other hand, the theory also holds a determining role for human and individual humans to act consciously to overcome problems in the social base, that is, problems in the other two components, technology and social organization. And an example on point was that is what Lenin had done when he created the Bolshevik Party and its theory of democratic centralism. There was room for very human mass action, in other words, to attack the problems confronting China, whatever they may be. The Cultural Revolution was theoretically sound, in other words. However, would this particular application of mass power work as well as Lenin's creation of the Bolshevik Party? Well, there was only one way to find out. Try it. That was the theoretical foundation for the experiment of the Cultural Revolution. Now, Deng Xiaoping and the Cultural Revolution is what we want to take a look at next. There were 5 years of exploratory steps. Mao set the scene for the Cultural Revolution by removing powerful officials of revisionist beliefs, and that struggle began in 1959 at the Lushan Conference, in which Peng's criticism of Mao's Great Leap Forward led to Peng's ouster. In 1965, Mao proceeded against his chief rival within the party, Chairman Liu Shaoqi, by criticizing Wu Han, the writer of the play Hai Rui Dismissed from Office. By criticizing and removing Wu Han from power, Mao planned also to remove his superior in Beijing, Peng Zhen, who was one of Liu Shaoqi's closest supporters. In other words, the campaign against Wu Han and Peng Zhen was the opening shot against President Liu Shaoqi. The literary controversy began when Beijing Deputy Mayor Wu Han published a historical drama entitled Hai Rui Dismissed from Office. Now, in the play, a corrupt emperor dismisses an honest civil servant named Hai Rui, the allegory being Mao as the corrupt emperor. So in February 1965, Mao asked his wife Chang Qing to get involved. Now, she had only been allowed to work in cultural matters, you'll recall, after the party strongly disagreed with Mao over his decision to marry her in 1938. They didn't like the fact that she had been a prostitute and an actress for the Green Gang and so on and so forth, and that Mao was leaving his second wife for her. And they said, well, if you're really going to do this, she cannot be involved in anything official. She can't come to any of our meetings, and we'll have to restrict her activities, if any, to cultural things like movies, and that she knows how to do, obviously, and plays and that sort of thing. So for all these years, that's really all she'd been allowed to do. Now he got her involved in this struggle by enlisting Shanghai writer Yao Wenyan to publish an article criticizing Wuhan's play for its counter-revolutionary content. Now, Yao's article boldly alleged that Hai Rui, dismissed from office, was really an allegory attacking Mao. That is, Mao was the corrupt emperor, and Peng Dehui was the honest civil servant. And you'll recall that we talked about Peng Dehui last time, because he was the hero of the 100 Regiment's offensive, and he was now boss of the People's Liberation Army. Now, Yao's article put his boss, Beijing Mayor Peng Zhen, a powerful official and Wuhan's direct superior, in a tight spot. Peng Zhen was head of the five-man group, as it was called, that was supposed to investigate the Hai Rui play matter as part of the greater task of determining how the fight against revisionism was going to be conducted. Peng Zhen was on the defensive now, and this was serious because of the fact that he was head of the committee commissioned by Mao to study the potential for a cultural revolution. And Peng Zhen knew he was implicated when Wu wrote the anti-Mao play, and Yao had attacked it, and he tried to contain Yao's influence. Therefore, the Yao article was initially only published in select local newspapers because Peng had prevented its publication in the nationally distributed People's Daily. To the degree he could, he stopped other major newspapers from publishing. Yao's article, he told the newspapers to write exclusively about academic discussion and not pay any heed to Yao's petty politics. This was a direct attack on Mao's orders. And just one quick aside, because I want to stick to the script to get through all of this. Beijing People's Daily you can get on the internet every day, and it's an excellent source because this is the official organ of the political bureau of the Communist Party of China. Now, Mao counterattacked firing Yang Shengkun, who was director of the party's general office, an organ that controlled internal communications, and installed in his stead a staunch loyalist, Wang Dongjing, who was head of Mao's personal security. So clearly Mao was not going to tolerate even the possibility of a coup against himself. In December '59, Defense Minister and Mao loyalist Lin Piao accused General Luo Ruqing of being anti-Mao, and at that time Luo was the chief of staff of the People's Liberation Army. In the Politburo, Mao pushed for an investigation of Luo. The upshot was the denunciation of Luo, and he was dismissed after delivering a self-criticism. Luo's removal secured the military command's loyalty to Mao, and for the next 5 years, the battle against revisionism would be fought in the press. For example, in the extensive analysis as Long Live Leninism and the articles about Comrade Toyati and us. Now, serious steps must be taken. The Februari Outline. On February 12, 1966, Mao returned his attention to Beijing Mayor Peng Zhen. The five-man group issued a report known as the Februari Outline. The outline implied that the party center defined the Hai Rui play as constructive academic discussion, which it certainly was not. Hai Rui was an attack against Mao. However, the five-man group Februari Outline had an aim, and that aim had been to put some distance between the Hai Rui play and Peng Zhen, the mayor, as far as political implications were concerned, but Mao was not fooled, and Jiang Qing and Yao Wenyan renewed their denunciation of Wuhan and Peng Zhen, and meanwhile, Mao sacked Propaganda Department Director Liu Dingyi, a Peng Zhen ally. The Liu's removal fight gave Mao complete control of the press. The anti-party clique. Mao would deliver his final blow to Peng Zhen at a high-profile Politburo meeting through loyalists, Kang Sheng and Chen Boda. They accused Peng Zhen of opposing Mao. The Februari Outline was the evidence of Peng Zhen's revisionism. He and 3 others were denounced as part of the Peng, Luo, Liu, Yang anti-party clique. On May 16, 1966, the Politburo formalized the decisions by releasing an official document condemning Peng Zhen and his anti-party allies, and the Politburo dismantled the five-man group and replaced it with the Cultural Revolution group. The early stage, the mass movement, I remember this very well as I'd only been married for 2 months. May 16th was my 24th birthday. My wife and I were deeply involved in organizing Los Angeles for Progressive Labor Party, which is what the Chinese lining CP in the USA was called. Now, the May 16th notification. So in May 1966, and expanded session of the Politburo began in Beijing. This Politburo expanded meeting was more of a conference, and as such it was intended to launch a campaign to mobilize the Politburo into activating Mao's struggle against revisionism. And accordingly, the conference featured Mao's political papers on class struggle. Then it reviewed the indictments against the recently ousted leaders Peng Zhen and Liu Ruqing. For example, it said, those representatives of the bourgeoisie who have sneaked into the party, the government, the army, and various spheres of culture are a bunch of counter-revolutionary revisionists. Once conditions are ripe, they will seize political power and turn the dictatorship of the proletariat into a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. Some of them we have already seen through, others we have not. Some are still trusted by us and are trained as our successors, persons like Khrushchev, for example, who are still nestling beside us." Unquote. This text, which became known as the May 16th notification, summarized Mao's ideological justification for the Cultural Revolution. Effectively, it implied that there are enemies of the communist cause within the party itself. This has always been true for every working-class vanguard party, he said, and in the Soviet Union these enemies had succeeded in replacing Stalin's Leninism with Khrushchev's revisionism. Now in China, these enemies waved the red flag to oppose the red flag, and the only way to identify these people was through the telescope and microscope of Mao Zedong thought. The party leadership united in proving Mao's agenda. The charges against formerly esteemed party leaders like Peng Zhen rang alarm bells in the CPC's de facto opposition, and this is when Deng Xiaoping gets involved. On May 25, 1966, under the guidance of Cao Yu, wife of Mao's Kang Sheng, Li Yanzi, a philosophy lecturer at Peking University, authored a big character poster, Dazibao they're called. They and their supporters posted it on a wall for public bulletins, and in their poster, Cao and Li attacked Beijing's University Party administration and its leader, Liu Ping. Cao and Li insinuated that the university leadership, like Peng Zhen, was trying to contain revolutionary students in a sinister attempt to oppose the party and advance revisionism. Then Mao endorsed Cao Ni's Dazibao as the first Marxist big character poster in China. Cao Ni's call to arms, now sealed with Mao's personal stamp of approval, had a ripple effect across all the educational institutions in China. Students everywhere began to revolt against the party establishment of their respective schools. So classes were canceled in Beijing primary and secondary schools, followed by a decision on June 13th to expand the class suspension nationwide, the idea being to bring these students into the fight against revisionism in their classrooms and then on the streets. By early June, throngs of young demonstrators lined the capital's major thoroughfares, holding giant portraits of Mao, beating drums and shouting slogans against his enemies. After seeking Mao's guidance in Hangzhou, Liu Shaoxi and Deng Xiaoping decided to send in work teams, the idea being to give ideological guidance to the massive demonstrations via squads of cadres. Mao approved this and urged the schools and the People's Daily to restore some semblance of order and reestablish party control. However, the hastily dispatched work teams had a poor understanding of student sentiment. The student movement, was focused on established party cadres, and many of these were part of the work teams. Therefore, the work teams themselves came under increasing suspicion for being yet another group aimed at thwarting revolutionary fervor. The party leadership subsequently divided over whether or not work teams should remain in place. Liu Shaoxi insisted on continuing work team involvement and suppressing the movement's most radical elements, fearing that the movement would spin out of control, and that was essentially the end of him. Bombard the headquarters. On July 16th, the 72-year-old Chairman Mao took to the Yangtze River in Wuhan with the press in tow in what became an iconic swim across the Yangtze to demonstrate his battle readiness. He subsequently returned to Beijing on a mission to criticize the party leadership for its handling of the work team's issue. And on July 24, 1966, Mao accused the work teams of undermining the student movement, calling for their full withdrawal. Several days later, at a rally at the Great Hall of the People, Mao announced his decision to set the new tone. Party leaders told the masses assembled to not be afraid and bravely take charge of the movement themselves, free of party work team interference. On the 28th of July 1966, Red Guard representatives wrote to Mao calling for rebellion and upheaval to safeguard the revolution, and Mao responded to the letters by writing his own big character poster entitled "Bombard the Headquarters," rallying people to target the command center of counter-revolution. Mao wrote that a new class of bourgeois elite was thriving in positions of authority in the government and the Communist Party. Mao was being interpreted as directly indicting not only Liu, but also Deng Xiaoping. The personnel changes at the full Politburo meeting reflected a new party's hierarchy more attuned to the demands of the moment. Liu and Deng kept their seats on the Politburo Standing Committee in name only. Lin Piao was elevated to become the party's number one behind Chairman Mao, and there was thorough reconstruction of the entire national bureaucracy of the Communist Party. The extensive organization and propaganda departments were taken over by the Cultural Revolution Group. On August 1st, 1966, the 8th full session of the 11th Central Committee convened to advance Mao's agenda. At the plenum, Mao showed outright disdain for Liu, repeatedly interrupting him as he delivered his opening day speech. And for several days, Mao continued to denounce revisionist opposition to his revolutionary vision. However, at the same time, it was clear that many attendees were revisionist in sympathy. Red Guards and the destruction of the Four Olds. On August 8, 1966, the party's Central Committee passed its decision concerning the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, quote unquote, later to be known as the 16 Points. This decision defined the counter-revolution, the Cultural Revolution, as a great revolution that touches people to their very souls and constitutes a deeper and more extensive stage in the development of the socialist revolution in our country. Although the bourgeoisie has been overthrown, it is still trying to use the old ideas, culture, customs, and habits of the exploiting classes to corrupt the masses, capture their minds, and stage a comeback. The proletariat must do just the opposite. It must meet head-on every challenge of the bourgeoisie to change the outlook of society. Currently, our objective is to struggle against and crush those people in authority who are taking the capitalist road, to criticize or repudiate the reactionary bourgeois academic authorities and the ideology of the bourgeoisie and all other exploiting classes, and to transform education, literature, and art, and all other parts of the superstructure that do not correspond to the socialist economic base, so as to facilitate the consolidation and development of the socialist system. The implications of these 16 points were far-reaching. It elevated what was previously a student movement to a nationwide mass campaign that would galvanize workers, farmers, soldiers, and lower-level party functionaries to rise, challenge authority, and reshape the structure of society. So on August 18, 1966, over 1 million Red Guards from all over the country gathered in and around Tiananmen Square in Beijing for a personal audience with the chairman. Lin Piao took into the center stage at the August 18th rally, vociferously denouncing all enemies in Chinese society that were impeding the progress of the revolution. Now, Mao sends Deng away, and he misses 7 years of the party. It was inevitable, given his leading role for so many years in the party and the government, that Deng Xiaoping would be branded as following a bourgeois reactionary line. Accordingly, Mao had him sent away for a period of re-education, and 3 times. The last time he went to work in a Jiangxi engine factory. 7 years later, Mao recalls Deng Xiaoping in March of 1973. China had a fragile economy. Zhou Enlai was falling ill to cancer. Mao recalled Deng Xiaoping to the political scene, taking up the post of vice premier. This was the first series of promotions for him approved by Mao. In January of 75, Zhou Enlai withdrew from active politics altogether, and Mao placed Deng Xiaoping in charge of the government, the party, and the military. Now, Deng earned the additional titles of PLA General Chief of Staff, Vice Chairman of the Communist Party, Vice Chairman of the Central Military Commission in a short time span. Against Deng's return stood the radical camp, who saw themselves as Mao's rightful political and ideological heirs, and they were taken by surprise. Mao was using Deng as a counterweight to their ultra-left faction in government, and to suppress any remaining influence of those formerly loyal to Lin Piao. Now, Mao had lost confidence in the ability of the Gang of Four to manage the economy. He knew Deng was competent and effective leader, and Deng's return set the scene for a protracted factional struggle, Zhou and Deng against Madame Mao and the Gang of Four. Jiang Qing and her associates had control of the mass media and the party's propaganda networks. Zhou and Deng held control of most of the government's organs. On some decisions, Mao sought to mitigate the gang's influence, but on others he acquiesced to their demands. Now, the Gang of Four's heavy hand in political and media control was one thing. However, it did not prevent Deng from reinstating his economic policies, and Deng emphatically opposed party factionalism and promoted unity as essential to restoring economic productivity. Much like the post-Great Leap restructuring, Deng streamlined the railway system, steel production, and other key areas of the economy. By November 1975, however, Mao saw that Deng's economic restructuring might negate the legacy of the Cultural Revolution, and he worried about that. He launched a campaign to oppose rehabilitating the case for the rightists, implying Deng might be the country's foremost rightist. After all, Mao then directed Deng to write a self-criticism, but a month later he changed his mind. On January 8, 1976, that is, not very long after this change of Mao's mind, Zhou Enlai died of bladder cancer, and on January 15, 1976, Deng Xiaoping delivered Zhou's official eulogy in a funeral attended by all of China's most senior leaders. Mao himself was absent, probably because his health was failing rapidly. After Zhou's death, Mao selected neither a member of the Gang of Four nor Deng Xiaoping to become premier, instead choosing the relatively unknown Hua Guofeng. The Gang of Four grew apprehensive that spontaneous large-scale popular support for Zhou could turn the political tide against them, and they acted through the media to impose a set of restrictions on overt public displays of mourning for Zhou. Years of resentment over the Cultural Revolution, the public persecution of Deng Xiaoping, seen as Zhou's ally, and the prohibition against public mourning led to a rise in popular discontent against Mao and the Gang of Four, and official attempts to enforce the mourning restrictions, mourning meaning M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, included removing public memorials and tearing down posters commemorating Zhou's achievements. And on March 25, 1976, Shanghai's Wen Weibao published an article calling Zhou the capitalist voter inside the party who wanted to help the unrepentant capitalist voter, Deng, regain his power. These propaganda efforts at smearing Zhou's image, however, only strengthened public attachment to Zhou's memory and flowed like water off Deng's back. Then there was the Tiananmen incident. That's not the famous one. This is on April 4th, 1976. On the eve of China's annual Qingming Festival, a traditional day of mourning, thousands of people gathered around the monument to the people's heroes in Tiananmen Square to commemorate Zhou Enlai. The people of Beijing honored Zhou by laying wreaths, banners, poems, placards, and flowers at the foot of the monument. The most obvious purpose of this memorial was to eulogize Zhou, but the Gang of Four were also attacked for their actions against the premier, and a small number of slogans left at Tiananmen even attacked Mao himself and his Cultural Revolution. Up to 2 million people may have visited Tiananmen Square on April 4. All levels of society, from the poorest peasants to high-ranking PLA officers and the children of high-ranking cadres, were represented in the activities. Those who participated were motivated by a mixture of anger over the treatment of Zhou, revolt against the Cultural Revolution, and apprehension for China's future. In the event did not appear to have coordinated leadership, but rather seemed to be a reflection of public sentiment. The Central Committee, under the leadership of Jiang Qing, labeled the event counter-revolutionary and cleared the square of memorial items shortly after midnight on April 6th. Attempts to suppress the mourners led to a violent riot, police cars were set on fire, and a crowd of 100,000 people forced its way into several government buildings surrounding the square, and many of those arrested were later sentenced to prison work camps, and similar incidents occurred in other major cities. Now, Jiang Qing and her allies pinned Deng Xiaoping as the incident's mastermind and issued reports on official media to that effect. Dong was formally stripped of all positions inside and outside the party on April 7th, and this marked Dong's second purge in 10 years. Now we have the death of Mao and the arrest of the Gang of Four. Now, on September 9th, 1976, Mao Zedong died. To Mao's supporters, his death symbolized the loss of the Revolutionary Foundation of Communist China. His death was announced on the afternoon of September 9th. A press release entitled "A Notice from the Central Committee, the NPC, the State Council, and the CMC to the whole party, the whole army, and to the people of all nationalities throughout the country" was issued. The nation descended into grief and mourning, with people weeping in the streets and public institutions closing for over a week. Hua Guofeng chaired the funeral committee. Shortly before dying, Mao had written Hua saying, quote, "With you in charge, I am at ease," unquote. And Hua used this message to substantiate his position as successor. Hua was seen to be without ambitions and seemingly posed no serious threat to the Gang of Four in the race for succession. However, the gang's radical ideas also clashed with influential elders and a large segment of party reformers. With PLA backing and the support of Marshal Ye Jianyang on October 10, 1976, 1 month after Mao's death, Dong sent Special Unit 8341, arresting all members of the Gang of Four. Their day was over. Now, as to Hua Guofeng, he publicly denounced the Gang of Four in 1976 and continued to invoke Mao's name to justify Mao-era policies. Hua spearheaded what became known as the two whatevers, namely, whatever policy originated from Chairman Mao, we must continue to support, and whatever directions were given to us from Chairman Mao, we must continue to follow. However, like Dong, Hua wanted to reverse the damage of the Cultural Revolution. Unlike Dong, who wanted to propose new economic models for China, Hua intended to move the Chinese economic and political system towards Soviet-style planning of the 1950s. He would have to give way to Dong. Why? Because it became increasingly clear to Hua that without Deng Xiaoping it was difficult to continue daily affairs of state. And on October 10, 1976, Deng Xiaoping, the day that the guys were arrested, personally wrote a letter to Hua asking to be transferred back to state and party affairs. Party elders also called for Deng's return, and it was made so. So in 1977, Hua named Deng vice premier. Hua later promoted Deng to various other positions, effectively catapulting Deng into becoming China's second most powerful figure. In August of '77, the party's 11th Congress convened in Beijing, officially naming Hua Guofeng, Ye Jianyang, Deng Xiaoping, Li Jiannian, and Wang Dongjing as the new leaders of the Politburo Standing Committee. In May 1978, Deng seized the opportunity to elevate his protege, Hu Yaobang, to power. He published an article in Guangming Daily using Mao's quotations supporting Deng's ideas. Hua was in support of Deng. On July 1, '78, Deng publicized Mao's self-criticism report of '62. Now, this was Mao's criticism of the failure of the Great Leap Forward, and in September of '78, Deng began openly attacking Hua Guofeng's two whatevers. And so it begins. On December 18, 1978, the pivotal third full session of the 11th Central Committee convened, and at that Congress, Deng called for a liberation of thoughts and urged the party to seek truth from facts and abandon incorrect dogma. This Congress officially marks the beginning of the Deng Xiaoping era. That's the last of 1978. So, by January 1st of 1979, we have the real beginning of the Deng Xiaoping years. It was the end of the Cultural Revolution experiment. Hua Guofeng engaged in self-criticism, and he called his two whatevers a mistake. Wang Dongjing, a trusted ally of Mao, was also criticized. At the Congress, the party reversed its verdict on the Tiananmen incident. Disgraced former leader Liu Shaoxi was rehabilitated and given a belated state funeral. At the fifth plenum held in 1980, Peng Zhen, He Long, and other leaders purged during the Cultural Revolution were politically rehabilitated, and Hu Yaobang became head of the party as its general secretary. In September 1980, Hua Guofeng resigned and Zhao Ziyang, another Dong ally, was named premier. Dong remained the chairman of the Central Military Commission. A new generation reversed Cultural Revolution policies almost in their entirety. Revisiting how Mao brought Dong back, Lin Piao was killed in an air crash while trying to flee from China after unsuccessfully trying to stage a coup against Mao. Deng Xiaoping came back as the most influential leader of the PLA. When Premier Zhou Enlai fell ill with cancer, Deng became Zhou's choice as successor. Mao had brought Deng back into politics in '74 as first vice premier. In practice, Deng was running daily affairs where he focused on reconstructing the country's economy, stressing unity as the first step by raising production. Getting the economy moving was the central problem for China from day one of the People's Republic, October 1st, 1949. The Gang of Four, the remnants of the Cultural Revolution, remained the ultra-left group in the Politburo known as the Gang of Four, led by Mao's famous wife. The former Green Gang actress Jiang Qing still had power within the party. The gang saw Deng as their greatest challenge to power, unsure as to whether Deng would destroy what they considered the positive achievements of the Cultural Revolution. And against rehabilitation, in late 1975, Deng had been asked to draw up a series of self-criticisms, although he admitted to having taken an inappropriate ideological perspective at one time while dealing with state and party affairs. He said his policies were essentially correct. His antagonism with the Gang of Four became increasingly clear. Mao refused to accept Deng's self-criticisms as sufficient and asked the party's Central Committee to discuss Deng's mistakes more thoroughly. Then, in January 1976, Zhou Enlai died. There was an outpouring of national grief. Zhou was a very important figure in Deng's political life, and this was well known in the party and the nation. After delivering Zhou's official eulogy at the state funeral, the Gang of Four began the so-called Criticize Deng and Oppose the Rehabilitation of Right-Leaning Elements campaign. Hua Guofeng, not Deng, was selected to become Zhou's successor. And then on February 2nd, '76, Mao asked the Central Committee to exonerate Deng altogether, and they issued a top priority directive officially transferring Deng to work on external affairs. The TPD, the top priority directive, removed Deng from the internal apparatus, but Deng stayed at home for several months awaiting his fate. Meanwhile, the political turmoil halted the economic progress Deng had made for China in the past year. On the 3rd of March '76, Mao acceded to his wife's demands and issued a directive reaffirming the legitimacy of the Cultural Revolution. However, he specifically pointed to Deng as an internal rather than external problem. That means a friend rather than an enemy. And a Central Committee directive issued to all local party organs to study Mao's directive and criticize Deng followed this. Then, on September 9th of '76, Mao Zedong died. Deng's reputation had suffered a severe blow when the King Ming Festival, public mourning of Zhou on that traditional Chinese holiday, had culminated in the Tiananmen incident, an event the Gang of Four branded as counter-revolutionary and threatening to the CPC in power. Furthermore, the gang accused Deng of masterminding the incident. This was the climax of the Gang of Four campaign for total power. Indeed, as Mao predicted, the nature of things was about to change, because Mao died on 9 September '76, and with his passing, so went the power of Madame Mao, Jiang Qing. With her ouster, so went her allies. They were all gone within 30 days, arrested by the special unit on Deng's orders, with PLA and 8 elders' support. And Deng's theory takes command. Hua Guofeng, Mao's handpicked successor, wanted to rid the party of Jiang Qing and her ultra-left extremists. He agreed with Deng in the removal of the Gang of Four from the levers of power in October of '76. Deng then emerged as the de facto leader of China, and on 22 July '77, Deng was restored to the post of Vice Chairman of the Central Committee, Vice Chairman of the Military Commission, and Chief of the General Staff of the People's Liberation Army. Hua pardoned Deng for any errors he may have committed and conceded the top leadership positions to him. That transition took over 3 years before being completed by 1980. For his part, Deng allowed Hua to retain membership of the Central Committee and quietly retire, fading away as old generals should. Dong said that the Cultural Revolution had utterly failed in getting production moving in China. However, it was an experiment that had to be done. The results taught as much in failure as they would have been had they been positive, and the Cultural Revolution had made the party and the nation aware of the danger of modern revisionism. Having said that, there was little more to be said on its behalf. The price of that education had been to retard China's industrialization, and now was time for all Marxists to finally concede that there is only one foundation for the socialist stage, and that is a fully modernized technological component in the social base, and to concede its concomitant, that it was now time to get on with that mode of production construction. To do so, the CPC needed a new program to create socialism as a socio-cultural evolutionary stage, a program always keeping in mind the conditions and characteristics of China, that is, socialism with Chinese characteristics. In 1977, Dong launched the Beijing Spring, which allowed open criticism of the excesses and suffering of innocent victims of the ultra-left. He announced the abolition of the preferential class background system in favor of promotion by merit, and this opened doors to hard workers regardless of having a family history of privilege, the idea being to encourage hard work. In November of '78, after the country had stabilized, Dong visited Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, and Singapore, and in Singapore he met with Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew. Deng was very impressed with Singapore's economic development, greenery, and housing, and accordingly China sent tens of thousands of Chinese students to Singapore and other countries around the world to learn and bring back their knowledge. The 11th Central Committee Congress in December of 1978 was where the rise to power of Deng as paramount leader was seen to be inevitable, even though Hua Guofeng formally monopolized the top positions in the People's Republic. Hua realized that it would be best to retire and turn over these offices to persons more attuned to the new course. This was the analog to Molotov taking over the Soviet government from Rykov in 1930, which we discussed in Chapter 15. In December 1978, during the third plenum of the 11th Central Committee Congress of the Communist Party of China, likewise handed Dong the reins of government power. In 1979, we had the beginning of the industrial reform that accelerated the market model based on the idea of a Chinese-style Leninist NEP, its goal to unleash the talents of energetic entrepreneurial types while maintaining state-owned enterprises. And in agriculture, we saw the replacing of the commune system, now giving the farming masses the responsibility to manage the land they cultivated and sell their products on the market. And finally, in 1979, Dong said China was sufficiently powerful under the CPC and its People's Republic of China government to open its economy to foreign investment. Thus, the new program would accelerate international opening to the capitalist world market. And on January 1st of '79, the USA recognized the PRC as the only China, abandoning Chiang's Republic of China. Business contacts between China and the West exploded. The aerospace company Boeing announced the sale of 747 aircraft to various airlines in the PRC. Coca-Cola made public their intention to open a production plant in Shanghai. And in early 1979, Dong undertook an official visit to the U.S., meeting President Jimmy Carter in Washington, as well as several congressmen, and the Chinese insisted that ex-President Richard Nixon be invited to the formal White House reception. During his U.S. visit, Dong inspected the Johnson Space Center in Houston, as well as the headquarters of Coca-Cola in Atlanta and Boeing in Seattle, and Dong made it clear that the new Chinese government's priorities were economic and technological development. Dong was true to his famous 1961 pronouncement, quote, "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white. If it catches mice, it is a good cat," unquote. Dong promoted Zhao Ziyang in 1980 to the premiership, relieved Hua Guofeng, and then promoted Hu Yaobang in 1981 to the post of party chairman. His team in place, he could accomplish his purpose, namely the advancing of four modernizations. That is, the modernization of the economy, agriculture, scientific and technological development, and fourthly, national defense. Dong announced an ambitious plan of opening the economy, and Dong took the position of chairman of the Central Military Commission in 1981. Now, by 1987, Portugal had agreed to return its colony of Macau. By 1999, this agreement was equal to that of Hong Kong with the Brits, The return of these two territories was based on political principle formulated by Dong himself called one country, two systems, the idea being coexistence under one political authority of capitalism and socialism. And although this theory was applied to the cases of Hong Kong and Macau, Dong intended to also present it as an attractive option to the people of Taiwan for eventual incorporation of that island into the PRC. Now, the problem of growth and overproduction. The rapid economic growth of China presented several problems. The 1982 population census revealed the extraordinary growth of the population, which already exceeded 1 billion people. Dong continued the plans initiated by Hua Guofeng to restrict births to only one child per family under pain of administrative penalty, and it would be several decades before this policy ended and the party again began to encourage reproduction. The renewal plans of Deng Xiaoping should not be misunderstood to mean that capitalist propaganda and its issuers would be tolerated. That could lead to a traitor Gorbachev kind of fifth column. And finally, in October '87, at the plenary session of the National People's Congress, Deng was reelected as chairman of the Central Military Commission. Having the guns in safe hands is always the key to stable state power. Simultaneously, Deng resigned as chairman of the Central Advisory Commission and was succeeded there by Chen Yun. Then there's the 70-year plan. Deng listed industrial and agricultural ways of entering the global capitalist marketplace, and he put forward 3 steps suitable for the economic development strategy of China within 70 years. The first was to double the 1980 GNP. This in order to ensure that people have enough food and clothing, and this was to be attained by the end of the 1980s, and it was. The second step was to quadruple the 1980 GNP by the end of the 20th century. In the event, it was achieved in 1995, 5 years ahead of schedule. And the third step was to increase per capita GNP to the level of the medium developed countries by 2050. In fact, the PRC will achieve a moderately prosperous society by 2020. So certainly by 2050, the Chinese people will be fairly well off and modernization realized. Against modern revisionism and correction of the Cultural Revolution, Deng continued to adhere to Mao's analysis of modern revisionism in the USSR, and he encouraged public criticism of the Cultural Revolution as the only way to learn from the negative results. Zhao Ziyang replaced Hua, also as premier in 1980. Hu Yaobang became party chief instead of Hua in 1981, and the party and the nation accepted these changes as inevitable and positive. Now, with regard to the 8 elders, important decisions were always taken in Deng's home. There, a caucus of 8 senior party cadres called 8 elders, including Chen Yun and Li Xiannian, Deng ruled as paramount leader, although he never held the top title of the party. He was able to successively remove 3 party leaders, including the man he had appointed as General Secretary, Hu Yaobang. Deng remained the most influential of the CPC cadre, and after 1987, his only official posts were as chairman of the state and the Communist Party Central Military Commissions. It is worth noting that this is the way Lenin ran the Bolshevik Party. You will recall our discussion of the Bolshevik Holy Trinity in Chapter 13. In this ideal situation, the party develops policy that is then implemented by the government and the state being the military and the police. Now, Deng's elevation to China's new number 1 figure meant that the historical and ideological questions around Mao Zedong had to be addressed properly. Because Deng wished to pursue deep reforms, he had to find new ways to continue Mao's hardline class struggle policies and public campaigns, and in 1982 the Central Committee of the Communist Party released a document entitled On the Various Historical Issues Since the Founding of the People's Republic of China, and in this document Mao retains his status as a, quote, great Marxist, proletarian revolutionary, militarist in general, unquote, and the undisputed founder and pioneer of the country and the People's Liberation Army. Quote, his accomplishments must be considered before his mistakes, unquote, the document declared, and Deng personally commented that Mao was 7 parts good and 3 parts bad. The document placed the prime practical responsibility of the failure of the Cultural Revolution to the counter-revolutionary cliques of the Gang of Four and Lin Biao. It was clear also that the entire ultra-left idea of an ideological prime mover, as opposed to a technological one, was at bottom the reason for the failure. Now, the improving relations with the outside world was an important shift in Dong's program of reforms and openness. The goals of Dong's reforms were summed up by the four modernizations, which we just reviewed, and in short, this is what socialism with Chinese characteristics means. Dong argued that China was in the first phase of the socialist stage. The task of the CPC was to perfect so-called socialism with Chinese characteristics and seek truth from facts. This was a reformulation of Vladimir Lenin's theoretical justification for the new economic policy in 1921. Lenin proved that Russia had not sufficiently developed the capitalist stage, and the Soviet government had no choice but to oversee the completion of that stage, and we discussed this in depth in Chapter 13. Now, Dong's interpretation of Mao reduced the role of ideology in economic decision-making, the problem we defined initially in this chapter. That is, how important is the role of ideology in the superstructure in accelerating the advance in the mode of production, the social base? The results of the Cultural Revolution gave Dong what he needed to resolve the quandary in a classical Marxist way. And that resolution is: technology sets the parameters within which it is possible to advance social relations. This in no way is a criticism of dialectical historical materialism, but a resolution of the age-old Marxist quandary we just discussed. Another way of thinking about this is the way Dong did, emphasizing that, quote, socialism does not mean shared poverty, unquote. Planning and market forces are not the essential difference between socialism and capitalism, he said. A planned economy is not the definition of socialism, because there's planning under capitalism. The market economy happens under socialism, too. Planning and market forces are both ways of controlling economic activity. He went on to say that we must not fear to adopt the advanced management methods applied in capitalist countries, something that Lenin had always said. The very essence of socialism is the liberation and development of the productive systems. Socialism and market economy are not incompatible, and we should be concerned about right-wing deviations, but most of all, we must be concerned about left-wing deviations. Now, although Dong implemented this thinking, it was Premier Zhou Enlai who pioneered the four modernizations, and when Zhou Enlai was in charge, he and Mao agreed to experiment with changes in the approach to training and rewarding hard work. Local leaders would test these ideas, but they would not be sanctioned by the central government and its directives until Mao and Zhou had adequately examined the results. They would then test these ideas about differential reward, meaning paying some workers more than others, on a larger scale. If they judged these differential reward operations as successful and promising, they would see to it that they were tested even larger and larger geographical and critical economical areas before being ultimately introduced nationally. This methodology was used in examining the idea of a household responsibility system. A poor rural village first secretly implemented this system. This experiment proved very successful in that poor rural village, and Dong and Zhou supported it, as did Chairman Mao, and it was adopted nationally. So that's a pretty good example of how they were proceeding. This is in sharp contrast to the pattern undertaken by the great traitor Michael Gorbachev, whose reforms were all counter-revolutionary in intent. Dong's bottom-up approach aimed at strengthening socialism. It was not counter-revolutionary in any way, and Dong stands in direct contrast to modern revisionist counter-revolution, and his theory is the reason for the contemporary success of China. Dong's reform included the introduction of planned decentralized management of the macroeconomy by technically proficient bureaucrats. Unlike the modern revisionist Soviet model, management of China was indirect through market mechanisms. Dong sustained Mao's legacy to the extent that he stressed the primacy of agricultural output and encouraged a significant decentralization of decision-making in the rural economy and individual farmer households. At the local level, material incentives, rather than political appeals, were used to motivate the labor force. China allowed farmers to earn extra income by selling the produce of their private plots in a capitalist market. Now, on the export focus, in a move toward market allocation, local municipalities and provinces were to invest in industries they considered most profitable, which encouraged investment in light manufacturing. Thus, Dong's reforms shifted the development strategy of China to an emphasis on light industry and export-led growth. Light industrial output was vital for a developing country coming from a low capital base, capital meaning machinery. Now, with the short gestation period, low capital requirements, meaning cash and machinery, and high foreign exchange export earnings, revenues generated by light manufacturing could be quickly reinvested in technologically more advanced production, including further capital expenditures and investments. Now, sparking industrial explosion. In sharp contrast to the much less successful reform in the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia and the People's Republic of Hungary, investments were not government mandated. The capital invested in heavy industry largely came from the banking system, where capital came from consumer deposits. And Dong's change was to prevent reallocation of profits, except through taxation or through the banking system. The reallocation in state-owned industries was somewhat indirect, making them independent of government interference. And these reforms sparked an industrial revolution in China. Dong decided to accelerate the modernization process by stepping up the volume of foreign trade, especially in the purchase of machinery from Japan and the West. By participating in such export-led growth, China was able to step up the four modernizations by attaining foreign capital and their advanced technologies and management experiences. And in that sense, capital means both money and machinery. Now, this dramatically accelerated the economic development of China, and Dong was able to attract foreign companies with a series of special economic zones designed for foreign investment without affecting the overall greater economy. We know that he got some of these ideas from Armand Hammer, who he talked to extensively about Lenin's NEP, and I think it's pretty obvious that if you set up a special economic zone that won't have any negative effect on the rest of the country, you can allow capitalists to do things there that they need to do in order to improve the efficiency of their operation, and so that's what made that successful. And it brought in a ton of money and a ton of profit. Now, the reform sought improved labor productivity through material incentives and bonus systems. Rural markets featured selling by co-ops and individual farmers of their homegrown products, and the communes selling surplus. Not only did these rural markets increase agricultural output, the new wealth in the hands of the farmers stimulated industrial development. The farmers had cash to buy from industry. In other words, farmers were able to sell surplus agricultural yields on the open market, producing a lot of income in small amounts that then stimulated domestic consumption of industrial products. Prosperity created political support for the CPC and its more difficult tasks. Dong, well aware of NEP. There are diagnostic parallels between Dong's market socialism and Vladimir Lenin's NEP. Nikolai Bukharin and Joseph Stalin had written about NEP, and both foresaw a sector for private entrepreneurs and markets based on trade, pricing rather than central planning. An interesting anecdote is in Armand Hammer's autobiography, Hammer, on his first meeting with Dong. Hammer says Dong pressed him as an industrialist and former investor in Lenin's Soviet Union for as much information on the NEP as possible. And Dong confronts the Tiananmen Square protest. Now, there were a series of demonstrations in and near Tiananmen Square in the People's Republic of China between April 15th and the 4th of June of 1989. The Tiananmen Square protests of '89 culminated in the June CIA attempted coup. 1989 was a year in which many modern revisionist governments collapsed. The protests were sparked by the death of Hu Yaoming, an official originally appointed by Dong, who had then wanted him gone, as had the 8 elders. Now, the CIA spread propaganda amongst the people denigrating the party's slow response and relatively subdued funeral arrangements, and in this they overplayed their hand, but they were full of hubris and were strutting on the global stage, having subverted the Soviet Union. So when public mourning began on the streets of Beijing and universities in the surrounding areas, the CIA foolishly tried to turn that discontent into a color revolution against the Communist Party of China. In Beijing, this was centered on the monument to the people's hero in Tiananmen Square, As we have seen, the CIA had done so well in the USSR by this time these events occurred that they got overly confident and they jumped the gun, and again their strategy developed with events, but was aimed in general at turning the morning into a conduit, focusing anger against CPC rule. They accused the party of nepotism in the government, the unfair dismissal and early death of Coup, and the behind-the-scenes role of the old man. Now, during the demonstration, Dong's General Secretary Zhao Ziyang at first supported the demonstrators and distanced himself from the Politburo. Martial law was declared on 20 May 1989 by the party's socialist guardian Li Peng, and the initial military advance on the city was blocked by the CIA. Mobilized dissidents, and the square's occupation lasted 7 weeks. Well, the CIA agents tried to raise a whole bunch of false flags. Number one was the issue of corruption within the government, but if there was one thing Dong was famous for, that was rooting out corruption, so they didn't get very far with that. And I won't go through all the others, they're in the book. You can. Now, there were casualties on both sides as 200,000 soldiers in tanks and helicopters went into Beijing on the 3rd and 4th of June and confronted the armed incidents. Dong's daughter, in her biography, this book right here, which I showed you last time, Dong Xiaoping, My Father, defends the actions that occurred and says they were done by a collective decision of the party leadership. There was mopping up to purge the sympathizers of the Tiananmen demonstrators, and the Communist Party initiated a 1.5-year-long program similar to the anti-rightist movement, and 30,000 communist political officers were deployed to the task. Now, Zhao was placed under house arrest by the Politburo, and Dong concurred. Dong soon denounced the CIA plot that had put the entire imperialist Western world against all socialist countries to force them to discard the socialist road and bring them under the monopoly of international capital and onto the capitalist road. And in the aftermath, only China, Vietnam, Laos, the DPRK, and Cuba escaped the plot. A few months later, he said the U.S. was too deeply involved in the student movement. He denounced foreign reporters who had given financial aid to these student leaders as agents of imperialism and helped the coup criminals escape to various countries. He told Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau that the U.S. wanted factions of the Communist Party to grab army units, and the country had risked a civil war. 2 years later, Dong endorsed Zhu Rongji, a Shanghai mayor, as vice premier candidate. Zhu Rongji had not found it necessary to declare martial law in Shanghai during the plot, and succeeded quite well in maintaining order in China's then greatest industrial city. Officially, Dong decided to retire from top positions when he stepped down as chairman of the Central Military Commission in 1989 and retired from the political scene in 1992. However, China was still in the era of Deng Xiaoping, and he continued to be widely regarded as the paramount leader of the country. Deng was recognized officially as the chief architect of China's economic reforms and China's socialist modernization. To the Communist Party, he was believed to have set a good example for communist cadres who refused to retire at old age, and he broke earlier conventions of holding office for life. He was often referred to as simply Comrade Xiaoping, with no title attached. An economic agenda in the spring of '92 was in full swing. Deng made his famous southern tour of China, visiting Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Zhuhai, and spending the new year 1993 in Shanghai, and he used these journeys as a method of securing his economic policy after his retirement from office. There is debate on whether or not Deng actually said his perceived catchphrase "to get rich is glorious." However, its attribution to him unleashed a wave of personal entrepreneurship that continues as one major driver of the economy of China today, and likewise his statement the leftist elements of Chinese society were much more dangerous than rightist ones, he would insist had been taken out of context. But one thing is certain, and that the idea of developing special zones for the operation of capitalism is certainly correctly assigned to him. The development of Shanghai's Pudong area, revitalizing the city as China's economic hub, was an early case in point. And the struggle against old line fakers continued after his retirement, and his southern tour showed it. At first, the Beijing and national media ignored the content of his speeches on this tour. Why? Because the national media was under the control of Jiang Zemin, who, as General Secretary of the Communist Party since 1989, had showed little support. Challenging their media control, Shanghai's Liberation Daily newspaper published several articles supporting Deng authored by Wang Ping, a nom de plume for Deng's Shanghai group. Now, these articles rallied support amongst local officials and the public at large. Then debate within the Politburo itself and the Central Committee won over the hard scientist, the geologist Jiang Zemin. Because of his conversion, he would become Deng's de facto successor, head of party, and as president. Now, the outcome proved to all concerned persons that the CPC could still solve its own political and philosophical quandaries with internal discussion and education. So, in summary, Deng's insistence on economic openness aided in the phenomenal growth levels of the coastal areas, especially the Golden Triangle region surrounding Shanghai. Deng reiterated that some areas must get rich before others, and asserted that wealth from coastal regions will eventually be transferred to aid economic construction inland, and the current CP leader, Chairman Xi, is now calling on the wealthier provinces to do exactly that, shift that wealth to the lesser rich provinces through a variety of innovative business practices. Now, Deng died on 19 February 1997 from a lung infection and Parkinson's disease. His successor, Jiang Zemin, was in firm control, and government policies maintained Deng's political and economic philosophies. Deng is today eulogized as a great Marxist, great proletarian revolutionary, statesman, military strategist, and diplomat. He is remembered as one of the main leaders of the Communist Party of China, the People's Liberation Army of China, and the People's Republic of China, the great architect of China's socialist opening up and modernized construction, and the founder of Deng Xiaoping theory. The public has been prepared for Deng's death, and the event of Deng's death was followed by the greatest publicly sanctioned display of grief for any Chinese leader since Mao Zedong. Deng was announced without any titles. Deng's death was announced without any titles attached, for there was no need. The entire nation knew he had taken Mao's role as captain of the ship of China, as the great helmsman, the great leader and teacher. Deng was simply Comrade Deng, as Joseph Stalin had been known simply as Comrade Stalin. At 10 o'clock on the morning of 24 February, people were asked by Premier Li Peng to pause in silence for 3 minutes. The nation's flags flew at half-mast for over a week. The nationally televised funeral was a simple and relatively private affair attended by the country's leader and Deng's family. It was broadcast on all channels. His successor, Jiang Zemin's tearful eulogy to the great leader declared, "The Chinese people love, thank, mourn, and cherish the memory of Comrade Deng Xiaoping. He devoted his lifelong energies to the Chinese people, performed immortal feats for the independence and liberation of the Chinese nation." Jiang vowed to continue Deng's policies, and after the funeral, Deng's organs were donated to medical research, and other bodily remains were cremated. His ashes were subsequently scattered at sea according to his wishes, and for the next 2 weeks, Chinese government media ran news stories and documentaries related to Deng's life and death, with the regular 7 p.m. national news program lasting 2 hours over the regular broadcast time. When compared to the memorials of other CPC leaders, those dedicated to Deng have been low profile, in keeping with Deng's pragmatism, and likewise he was cremated as opposed to being embalmed like Mao. A bronze statue of him was dedicated 13th of August 2004 in the city of Guang'an, Deng's hometown in southwest China's Sichuan province. The statue erected to commemorate Deng's 100th birthday. The statue shows Deng dressed casually, sitting on a chair and smiling. The Chinese characters for Statue of Deng Xiaoping are inscribed on a pedestal, and the original calligraphy written by Jiang Zemin, then chairman of the Central Military Commission. Deng Xiaoping's former residence in his hometown of Taifang Village in Sichuan province have been preserved as a museum telling Deng's life story. In Bishkek, capital of the Republic of Kyrgyzstan, there is a 6-lane boulevard, 82 feet wide, 2 miles long, called the Deng Xiaoping Prospect, that was dedicated on the 18th of June of 97, and a 6-foot-high red granite monument stands at the eastern end of this route. The epigraph, "In memory of Deng," written in Chinese, Russian, and Kyrgyz. A documentary on Deng entitled Deng Xiaoping was released by CCTV in January 1997. That's China's Central Television, which you can get 24 hours a day on the internet. That chronicles his life from his days as a student in France to his southern tour of 92-93, and in 2014 a TV commemoration series entitled Deng Xiaoping at History's Crossroads was released by CCTV, celebrating the 110th anniversary of his birth. And that brings us to a conclusion of Part 3 in this Socialism with Chinese Characteristics series, Part 3 of Deng Xiaoping. And the only other thing I was going to add is you're going to see now on the internet that there are several new channels. The Qixi Journal, which is the Communist Party of China's theoretical journal, is now available in English, and you can write to them. I sent them a copy of this book yesterday. And they have there's another full-time channel on the G20 Hangzhou Summit meeting coming up. There's another full-time channel on the Belt and Road Initiative. And there's the People's Daily, Beijing People's Daily. There's CCTV and Xinhua. So those are different sources that are available on the internet now in English that you can correspond with should you wish to do so. Our next lecture will be on Jiang Zemin and his presidency. After Deng, there are 3 more presidents who are in Xi's presidency right now. So we'll go to Jiang Zemin next and see how he develops socialism with Chinese characteristics.